Hello guys, welcome back. It's Ion and I am Sub. So today we are going to talk about Xinjiang Uyghurs, the Muslim crackdown. Please subscribe the channel and hit the bell icon so that you will get notification every time we will upload a new video. China is facing growing criticisms over its persecution of some Muslim minority groups, huge numbers of whom are allegedly being held in internment camps. In August 2018, a UN committee heard that up to 1 million Uyghur Muslims and other Muslim groups could be being detained in the western Xinjiang region, where they are said to be undergoing re-education programs. The claims were made by rights groups, but China denies the allegation. At the same time, there is a growing evidence of oppressive surveillance against people living in Xinjiang. So, who are the Uyghurs? The Uyghurs are mostly Muslims and numbers about 11 million in western China's Xinjiang region. They see themselves as culturally and ethnically close to Central Asian nations, and their language is similar to Turkish. But in recent decades, there has been a mass migration of Han Chinese, or which is the ethnic majority of China, to Xinjiang region, and the Uyghurs feel their culture and livelihoods are under threat. Where is Xinjiang? It's in the far west of China and is the country's biggest region. It's borders by several countries including India, Afghanistan and Mongolia. Like Tibet, it's an autonomous region, meaning it in theory has a degree of self-governance away from Beijing, but in practice both face major restrictions by the central government. For centuries, the economy of Xinjiang has centered on agriculture and trade, and towns thrive because they were on the Silk Road. Back in the early 20th century, the Uyghurs briefly declared independence, but the region was brought under the complete control of mainland China's new communist government in 1949. What's happening to people in Xinjiang? In August 2018, a UN Human Rights Committee was told the credible reports that China had turned the Uyghur Autonomous Region into something that resembles a massive internment camp. About 1 million people may have been detained, the committee was told. The reports are backed by rights groups, with Human Rights Watch saying people with relatives in 26 so-called sensitive countries like Indonesia, Kazakhstan and Turkey have been rounded up. Anyone who has contacted someone abroad via WhatsApp is also targeted, according to HRW. Rights groups also say people in camps are made to learn Mandarin Chinese, swear loyalty to President Xi Jinping and criticize or renounce their faith. HRW says Uyghur people in particular are subject to intense surveillance, from facial recognition cameras to QR codes on people's doors. So officials can check the codes to see who is inside at any point. People are also reportedly made to undergo biometric tests. Media are almost completely banned from Xinjiang, so getting first-hand reports is very difficult. However, there are evidence of camps and an intense police presence at entry level. Officers carried out checks for sensitive material on people's phones. Satellite images that appear to show at least 44 high-security buildings that had been erected in Xinjiang in recent years. Those detained would be woken before dawn and would be forced to learn laws and sing a song entitled Without the Communist Party. There can be no new China. What about Uyghur violence? China says it's dealing with a threat from separatist Islamist groups, and while some Uyghur Muslims have joined the Islam State militant group, riot groups say violence in Xinjiang stems from China's oppression of peoples there. In 2009, riots in the regional capital Urumqi killed at least 200 people, mostly Han Chinese. Since then, there have been a number of attacks, including one on a police station and government office in July 2014 that killed at least 96 people. Attacks blamed on Xinjiang separatists have also taken place outside the region. In October, a car was driven into a crowd in Beijing's Tiananmen Square. The latest government crackdown began after 5 people were killed in a knife attack in Xinjiang in February 2017. At the time, Xinjiang's Communist Party boss Chen Guanggu urged government forces to bury the corpse of terrorists in the vast sea of a people's war. It's hard to escape the conclusion that China is wielding a hammer to crack a nut, but Xinjiang security forces are already well armed with every form of nutcracker, including highly trained manpower, rapid response units, mobile police stations, surveillance cameras, helicopters, drones, satellite tracking of vehicles, biometrics, and grid-style management of every community right down to the individual household. In Xinjiang, recent attacks may be small, but Beijing needs to show its public that it is doing something about them, even if that something is ineffectual or worse, counterproductive. Turning to the third possible motive for an all-out offensive against scattered enemies armed only with knives, China has powerful vested interests whose objectives are advanced by taking up the security threat. The politicians involved want to strengthen their hand before a crucial Communist Party Congress in the autumn. The security services want to expand their bureaucratic empire, and the business producing surveillance equipment and software have money to make. Despite China's best efforts to cut off the routes of escape via Central and Southeast Asia, more than 100 Uyghur fighters have made their way to Iraq and Syria, and now IS is using footage from Xinjiang in its propaganda videos. It's impossible to judge how far this would have happened without policies of religious and cultural repression in Xinjiang. Banning beards and headscarves in public places, forcing Muslims to break their rules on fasting, demolishing mosques, micromanaging religious education, exacting outward shows of ideological loyalty serves to alienate Uyghurs in Xinjiang. In many countries, terror triggers the impulse to repress and punish in the community which appears to harbor the terrorist. But other societies debate the danger of alienation and the risk that those criminalized may become even more vulnerable to exploitation by extremists. So, about these things, China says that it's responding to ethnic separatism and violent terrorist criminal activities. At a UN meeting in Geneva in August 2018, Chinese official Hu Lianhe said reports of 1 million Uyghurs being held in re-education centers were completely untrue. But in October 2018, the top official in Xinjiang said vocational education centers had been set up and were proving effective in staving off terrorism. Suraj Jakir said classes were given on Chinese history, language and culture, and while he did not say whether people were forced to attend, he added people in the centers were provided with nutritious free diets. It's very unusual for China to give public explanations about how it deals with the situation in Xinjiang, and because it controls access to Xinjiang, it's been hard for anyone to receive impartial information about what is happening there. So, what is the world doing? There is growing international criticism of China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims, but as of yet, no country has taken any action beyond issuing critical statements. In the US, a congressional committee on China has urged the Trump administration to place sanctions on officials and companies involved in the ongoing human rights crisis in Xinjiang. The committee wrote Muslim ethnic minorities are being subjected to arbitrary detention, torture, egregious restriction on religious practice and culture, and a digitized surveillance system so pervasive that every aspect of daily life is monitored. The UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet has also demanded that monitors be allowed access to Xinjiang, a request that drew an angry response from Beijing.